Hey guys, I'm back. I was organizing some tackle in the boat and thought I'd share a little story with you, one that I think of often when I'm in the boat. And this is probably my favorite fishing story. You ever catch a monster that you just want to tell the world about? Well, this happened back in 2013. Sit back, grab a drink, light your pipe, light that fire, whatever it takes. It's story time. I was in my second or third year of fishing tournaments with a small club local here in St. Louis. And my youngest daughter wanted to start fishing tournaments with me. In 2013, she was just about 14. She'd have turned 14 that June. This happened March of that year, so she was still 13 years old, I think. And we went out fishing and fished a tournament on a small lake in southern Missouri. So we get down, this is a one-day tournament. We get down to the lake on Friday and start fishing just to see if we can figure out a bite. This is the second week of March. It's cold. We had overcast, rainy weather. Little drizzle. It wasn't miserable. It was cold. St. Louis or southern Missouri in March can still be cold. If the sun isn't out, it's chilly. She endured and really just pushed right through it, casting away all day. Both of us struggled to really find any fish. We hadn't fished this lake much before, a time or two, but it's not like we had any secret spots that we could go to and we knew we'd catch fish. So we fished all day, and I don't really remember much about what we caught that day. Any dads out there that are fishing with your daughters or your sons know that when you're out fishing, it's really not even about the fish you catch, it's about the time you spend together. And that's exactly what this is every time I fish with my daughter. So tournament day comes around, and that time of year our club holds a 6-hour tournament early in the year, and the reason for that, it's a one-day tournament, and the reason for that is if we have bad weather, then they don't want people having to find rooms for the weekend and have to worry about traveling to get home if there's snow. Just so happened that this year the weather was great, but we take off at 10 a.m. instead of early in the morning. It's a little bit warmer at 10 a.m. if the sun's going to come out, and if it is going to warm up. By 10 a.m. there were 2 other clubs that had already taken off that day on this lake, and we had a game plan as to what we were going to do. We had a bluff line that we were going to fish. By 10 a.m. when we took off, we were boat number 20 something, as I recall, out of a group of maybe high 20s, low 30s boats. There might have been 32 boats in that tournament. And by the time our number is called and we take off, there's very few spots on that lake that are that you can just pull up to and fish. Any the spots that you would think you'd find fish, bluff lines and main points. And with the fact that we had 2 other small clubs take off a couple hours before us, there wasn't a spot on that lake that hadn't been fished by the time we took off. So after we take off, we've got a game plan. We're gonna go get some fish, and we pull up to our very first spot, and there's already a line of 4 boats waiting to get to that spot. God only knows how many people had fished that already. And that's when I realized this is going to be tough to find any spot that's not been fished. We need to figure out a game plan. So we literally pulled right across the lake. We could see the bluff line off in the background. And I was just trying to come up with plan B. And we started fishing just the bank, a shallow bank. My daughter was throwing a spinning rod at the time. I hooked her up with my spinning rod, and thankfully, before that trip, to avoid the mess that you can get with twisted line with fluorocarbon, I loaded that spinning reel up with nothing but braid, and she was fishing straight braid to whatever it was we tied on. And I have the habit, especially then when she was 13 years old, of keeping her in my peripheral vision, out of the corner of my eye, all the time. And if she gets a snag, she feels, still to this day, she feels a little guilty that she's got to tell me, hey, Dad, I'm snagged. Can we go back and get my line? And I don't mind. I don't mind that at all. I still say to this day to anybody I'm fishing with, if you're not snagging, you're not fishing. So we've been fishing for 15-20 minutes on this bank, waiting for something to open up. Maybe we might find something on that bluff line. I wasn't even sure if we were going to go over there yet. And while we're fishing, she's throwing an X-Wrap straight to braid on the spinning rod. And we'd been casting and casting for, I don't know, 10, 15, maybe 20 minutes. So I'm watching her out of the corner of my eye, and she's just standing there holding that rod and reel. And she's not reeling, and she looks back at me. I said, so were you snagged? What are you doing? What's going on? She says, I don't know. I said, well, pull on it a little bit, see if it's stuck to the bottom, see if you are snagged. And she pulls on it a little bit, and about the time that line went tight, and it starts rip and drag. She's probably got a 12-pound braid, 10-pound braid on that spinning reel, and I mean it's ripping out like there's no tomorrow. So she sets the hook. I'm yelling at her, set the hook, set the hook. She sets the hook, and she starts reeling, and she starts reeling, and whatever she has, it's big. And at this point, I figure she's got a big catfish, or she's hooked snagged onto a carp or something like that. So she's reeling in, and I move to the back of the boat, and I grab the net, and she's holding that spinning rod with the butt of the rod up against her belly, and she's cranking away, and she's got her other hand above the reel, and she's cranking, and the fish is coming in a little closer and a little closer, and some reason she switched. And she keeps saying, Dad, help me, Dad, help me. Well, I would have loved to have grabbed that rod, but this is her fish. I wanted her to do this. So I said, no, sweetheart, you got it. You can do this. And I'm encouraging her. And her hand holding the rod moves up the rod maybe a foot. And as she's holding the rod up here and cranking, the fish is getting closer and closer to the edge of the boat. And as it gets closer, I see it. And it's a bass. It's a big green bass. And wow, I don't know that I already know. I can tell you, I have never seen or caught anything that big. Well, I've been there. And she keeps saying, Dad, help me, Dad, help me, Dad, help me. I'm like, no, sweetheart, you've got this, you've got this. And about the time that fish went right underneath the bottom corner of that boat and started running from the back of the boat to the forward. So as the fish is running under the boat from the front to the back, I'm standing there next to her with the net ready to go. And I can see she's actually moved her hand that's holding the rod up about a foot. The butt of the rod is still up against her stomach, and she's trying to crank, and that rod is just, on a spinning reel, is not stable and just rocking. She really did not have control over that at all. And I can see the rod starting to slip out of her fingers. It keeps getting closer and closer to the end of her fingers. And the whole time she keeps saying, Dad, you got to take this, you got to take this, help me, Dad, help me. And I keep encouraging her that she can do this, because I know that she can. Well, finally I gave in. So I took the rod from her and handed her the net. I held the rod for maybe 5 or 6 seconds, long enough to put a little force on that fish and pull it back out from underneath the boat, which brought it to the top of the water, and she netted it. Well, this is a big fish. This is the biggest fish that I've ever had in a net in the boat that I've been in. This is the biggest fish that I've ever netted in my boat. And I mean, we celebrated, and I'll be the first to admit that I actually cried a little that day. The excitement of us hooping and hollering and high-fiving and hugging was enough to get the attention of pretty much everyone within 5 or 6 football field lengths away, and they all knew something big happened. I'm sure they didn't know what, but that fish ended up being 7.91 pounds. That was the only fish she caught and weighed in that day. To my 3 fish, which in comparison to size, my fish would have been bait for hers. Anyway, she had fished 1 or 2 other tournaments with me before that, the previous year, and she never caught a fish that was big enough to keep. She caught a few fish, but nothing big enough to weigh in. So that's the first fish that she ever weighed in a tournament. And she's a little shy, so she was worrying about the weigh-in and the reaction of everybody. And I kept telling her, when it's time for us to weigh our fish, you need to reach in and grab that fish. And you pull that out and you hold it up high and you just yell "booyah" at the top of your lungs. No, Dad, I can't do that, Dad. No, you wait, you pull it out of the bag. Well, when it was time, I wasn't pulling it out of the bag. I let her pull it out of the bag. And when she did, to my surprise, she held it up and she went "booyah." And everybody had a reaction. And the entire club, 60 plus people that were there for that weigh-in, all were applauding. Most of them with their mouths hanging wide open. Our club was started in 1988, and to this day there has only been 1 fish weighed in bigger than that fish. That's 791, and it was something like 793 or 794. So she was right there. I've never caught anything that big. I hope someday that I will. But in the meantime, I'm gonna keep a warm heart with the memory of that story. I hope you've enjoyed this story. It got a little longer than I expected, but that's the excitement of a proud dad, and a story that I'm going to carry beyond the grave. Anyway, thanks for taking the time to stop by, for listening to the story. If you've made it this far and you like it, hit the like button. While you're at it, hit subscribe. It helps me out and puts a smile on our faces too. So take your kids fishing. You'll create memories like this that will last a lifetime. In the meantime, with your kids or without, hopefully with, fish more, stress less. Thanks for watching. God bless.